Next, I'd like to once again ask our new chair, Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf, to join me on stage for the presentation of our highest award, the James Bryant Conant Award. We are very excited with the James Bryant Conant Award this year because we have a very amazing individual who was nominated. This is one of our biggest awards, and we usually have 10 to 15 people nationally who are awarded. Some of our previous award winners include people like Mr. Rogers, or if you think about Sal Khan, or we've had amazing leaders from far behind. We've had over 50 years of these leaders that we have presented on. One of the things that we're excited about for this year's nominee is that he actually comes from a state agency and may not be as prominent, but has made just as big of an impact. And I'll let Governor Wolf talk about it.
By the way, Mr. Rogers is from Pennsylvania. Is that okay? Thank you. So I am really pleased to be the chair of ECS, and it makes me really happy as one of my first duties is to present this award. The James Bryant Conant Award has been recognizing outstanding educators since 1977. And as you know, James Bryant Conant was a great educator himself, a university president, a chemist, professor, and ultimately an ambassador. His vision that states can remain unique but still learn from each other is what created the Education Commission of the States. He was one of the founders of this, and it's what still brings us together here today. So it is in his honor that this award is named, and we've had a few memorable honorees, as Jeremy pointed out. Among the others, including Mr. Rogers, is Carl Perkins, Marion Wright Edelman, Thurgood Marshall, and of course, as you said, Sal Khan. So it is now my pleasure to present the 2019 James Bryant Conant Award to Texas Deputy Commissioner for Governance, A.J. Crabill, for his leadership in strengthening local Texas school boards. Please give him a round of applause.
Thank you so much, Commission. Can we give a round of applause? Has this staff not been amazing this conference? Student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. Student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. These words begin an amazing and unique journey, the Lone Star Governance Seminar and our coaching system. And they represent a commitment between us and the students we serve to be constantly willing as adults to be analyzing and reevaluating our behaviors, to find ways for them to be more tightly aligned with improvements in student outcomes. This is the journey that I want to take you on a little bit today to share some of what we've been doing. Unfortunately, across the nation, many of us have given up on what's possible for school boards. We have come to this belief that maybe they need to be endured, but that there's not really a willingness on their part to change or maybe a capacity to change. But our experience says something different entirely. That through the work that we've done, we have seen a path forward, a path for school board members and school boards become deeply entrenched in the work of improving student outcomes. It's the path that's available to any state that has the courage to pursue it. But the work of student outcomes improvement through adult behavior change is not a simple one, because adult behavior change does not come easily. In our work, we've identified 3 key drivers of adult behavior change. The first of those drivers we refer to as knowledge. And what knowledge is, it's what we know about a key topic. And knowledge is a driver of adult behavior change. The more I know about something, the more I can realign my behaviors with that knowledge. If my aspiration is to teach senior English, but I don't actually know anything about English, then that gives rise to one set of adult behaviors. But as I gain expertise and I begin to master the knowledge around English, my adult behaviors can change. Knowledge is a driver of adult behavior change. But of the three, it's the smallest. It's necessary, but it's also entirely insufficient. The second key driver then of adult behavior change we refer to as skill. Where knowledge is what do I know, skill is to what extent can I employ the things that I know. If my aspiration is to teach senior English and I have mastered the knowledge around what you add to that in terms of pedagogy, what you add to that in terms of instructional strategy, these are things that allow me to further leverage that knowledge. Skill is a driver of adult behavior change. But again, even skill, as you can see from my rudimentary artwork, is only a small driver compared to the third and the most crucial driver of adult behavior change, which we refer to as mindset. Mindset is all about how is the world occurring for me? How am I making meaning of the circumstances that are taking place around me? And there are two ways that we can go with this mindset work. We can engage in a disempowering mindset. And we can begin to use all the circumstances surrounding us to make excuses for why students aren't getting equitable access to the education they deserve. Or we can engage in an empowered mindset. And we can begin to look within for what are ways that I can be the catalyst of transformation in the lives of our students. My senior year of high school, I was bounced from senior English class to senior English class to senior English class and wound up spending the remainder of my senior English education learning from the assistant principal in his office. Many of the teachers had learned about my dropping out of school the year earlier, had learned about my homeless status, and had a sense of some of the trouble that I'd caused in previous schools. And they had reached this mindset that AJ doesn't actually want to learn, and AJ is going to be trouble. But at the exact same time, I had other teachers, Mr. DeBarth and Mrs. Murphy, who had arrived at a very different mindset. Inside the mindset that they were living into, they saw excellence in me, and they saw themselves as the bridge to helping me accomplish that excellence. Inside of Mr. DeBarth's class, history, and the Model UN club that he led, I was able to excel, and I won state and regional awards. Inside Mrs. Murphy's economics class and the junior achievement club that she led, I was able to excel, and I won the citywide award for entrepreneurship. They saw what was possible, and inside of that empowering mindset, I stepped into what was possible. Unfortunately, when you think of most school board workshops, many of them don't actually focus on mindset. They don't actually focus on what's possible for students. What they're really looking at is knowledge and skills. And saying, if we just beat board members over the head with the same tired messages that we've been throwing at them for decades, maybe that will inspire them. Well, just stop rubber stamping and don't micromanage and all these other messages that we have tried. But this is a failed pedagogy. And we rebuke it. This is not the path forward for transformation. In the work that we do, we begin with mindset, and only after a board has embraced an empowering mindset around what's possible for student outcomes can we then journey forward. That conversation begins in this way, with inviting superintendents, board members, senior administrators to begin to consider this question: what in your adult behavior may have made it harder for your students to be successful? As you begin to consider the question I just posed, begin to insert yourselves into this conversation. What are the ways in which your adult behavior in your respective states may have unintentionally made it harder for your students to be successful? Maybe you had withdrawn your time, talent, and treasure from a school system because you were justifiably frustrated with failures of leadership. Maybe there is someone speaking poorly about public education, and you chose to remain silent because it was more comfortable to ignore it. Or maybe there was an initiative that you knew would make a difference for students, and you chose not to push it because of what if pushing might cost you. These examples, the many more that may be true in your lives, give rise to the larger conversation. The student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. Starting with me, starting with you. As we've engaged in this work around adult behavior change, what we found is that when adults are living inside of this empowered mindset, that it is natural for them to begin to reach out for knowledge and skills that align with their new understanding. When they do so, it's natural for our highly trained governance coaches to work with them around three key areas that they can begin to leverage that will have an impact on student outcomes. The first is to adopt goals about student outcomes. to actually say and put in writing the form of SMART goals. Here are the things that we want our children to know and be able to do. The second is to adopt a progressive monitoring that says each month we should be looking at lead indicators to figure out how are we doing? How are we actually getting closer to the things that we aspire for on behalf of our students? And then finally, to invest ourselves as a governing body into monitoring progress toward those goals, month in and month out. We have been coding school board meetings for the past several years, hundreds and hundreds of hours of meetings. And what we found is that on average across Texas, and frankly, the other boards that we've coded around the nation, that on average what they are investing in monitoring progress to the student outcome goals is 0 to 5%. 0 to 5%. What this describes is the triumph of a focus on adult inputs and adult preference over an intense focus on what's possible for student outcomes and by paying attention to issues of equity and the needs of our students. This, friends, does not transformation make. And so we have begun this process all across the state because what's possible here isn't just my story. This is a story written through the sacrifice of adults all across the nation and across Texas to deeply engage themselves, to constantly be reevaluating what in my adult behaviors is holding back what's possible for my children. And in this process, it's already begun. It's happening in places like San Elizario, Texas, where the board there has taken their student outcome goals and they've gone out into the community and said, here is what's possible for our students, and we inspire and engage you to come and join us in this work. It's happening in places like Donna, Texas, where the board is actually completely reimagining its policy manual because they've recognized that as long as our governing policies aren't focused on student outcomes, our governance practices won't be either. It's happening in places like Sierra Blanca, where a tenacious group of board members took back what was possible. They were on the edge of state-ordered dissolution. And as they got intensely focused on improving student outcomes and monitoring progress toward that, they, in terms of growth, have become one of the fastest moving school systems in their region. The people standing with me aren't merely governance leaders. They're governance revolutionaries. And they believe in what's possible when adults begin to aggressively reevaluate our behavior and to make changes in that behavior to be in alignment with what the research says are things that actually have an impact on student outcomes. The work that they have done is remarkable. But it's not work that belongs to merely us. It's a revolution that can be inspired all across the nation. A work that has us call for a 50% focus of every board meeting. Imagine what it would be like if all the school board meetings in your communities were actually investing half of their time every month in monitoring progress towards SMART student outcome goals. Imagine what it would be like if instead of this glorification of adult inputs and busy spending all their time talking about construction, all their time talking about cheerleader outfits, talking about stadiums and jumbotrons, what would it be like if boards got deeply invested in saying, here are the things we aspire to on behalf of our scholars? And here are the steps that we're measuring month by month, half of our time invested in trying to identify to what extent are we actually accomplishing that. That is the vision that we bring forward. That's what we mean when we say that student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. Today, we invite you to be a part of this governance revolution with us. And we invite you through two specific invitations. The first is to adopt this idea of a student outcomes focus for every boardroom, every school system, and every state. And the way that you do that is we ask you to ask us about our adult behavior change. Every person on this stage has had to wrestle with the question of what in my behavior is actually making it harder for my students to be successful. And as they've wrestled that, it's created an opening in their actions, an opening in their adult behaviors to become deeply invested in improving outcomes for the students that they serve. Ask us about our adult behavior change and the challenging journey that's presented. The second invitation then is to come witness adult behavior change for yourself. Particularly with the school systems represented here on the stage, but to any of the school systems doing this work. We invite you to come and see it for yourself, and certainly to come to our 2-day workshops where we deepen into this conversation in a powerful way. I assure you it's unlike anything you've ever seen. You'll be grateful that you did. Ultimately, student outcomes don't change until adult behaviors change. Starting with you, starting with me. If you were in any way fired up about what's possible for the students that you serve through challenging governance systems to become transformative, to be student outcomes focused rather than adult input focused. If you're in any way fired up about what these amazing people standing on the stage have done, my request is that you not only commit yourselves to action, but you join me this wonderful afternoon in congratulating these leaders as your 2019 Conant Award recipients. Thank you.